Hello and welcome to the DATAcated Show. My name is Kate Strashny. I'm the host of the DATAcated Show and founder of DATAcated. We have a very special episode today because we have not one but two awesome guests that we're going to talk to. I'll bring them up in just a minute. I'll tell you the topic. We're going to talk about winning with data science. I know we're hearing a lot about Gen AI and all the crazy artificial intelligence sort of new shiny objects that are coming up right now. But I do believe that it's going to come back to the data, come back to the data science and how we can actually use that data to make a difference. Now, our guests today are Howard Friedman. He's an adjunct professor at Columbia University, and he's joined with Akshay Swaminathan, who is his co-author of a book that I'll tell you about in a second. He's also the head of data science at Cerebral. Now, before I bring them on, I want to let you know that they have an interesting story that I actually can't wait for you to hear. I can't wait to hear it myself and uncover all the details. But they wrote a book together. It's called Winning with Data Science. It's a handbook for business leaders. And I think it's a very much needed handbook. I think everyone at this point needs to know enough about data science, including business leaders. I think we can't continue on saying, oh, it's just a technical concept I don't understand, and relying on our team. So I think this handbook is here at a great time. Now, if you're joining us live, you can go ahead and add any questions or comments as you're joining the show. We'll try to take as many of those as possible in the next 30 minutes. Now, I'm going to bring up our two guests here, Howard, Akshay. Hello, and welcome to the DATAcated Show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Awesome. Well, first of all, congratulations on the book. Very exciting. I know that it takes an effort. And it's actually, people think it's easier to do it with a partner to co-author a book. I tend to disagree. I think doing it alone is much easier. So I want to hear your story. But before we get into that, some quick introductions would be great. So Akshay, if we want to, let's start with you. Tell the audience a bit about yourself.
Thanks, Kate. Great to be here. My name is Akshay Swaminathan. My goal is to improve healthcare delivery systems using data and data science. So that means getting the right treatment to the right patient at the right time. These days, I wear two hats. One is as head of data science at Cerebral, which is a national telemental health provider. And the other is as a researcher in AI and in healthcare at Stanford University.
Great. Two hats is better than one is what I say. Nice. Thanks for that. And Howard, let's tell the audience a bit about yourself.
Thank you. Well, great to be here, Kate. Thanks so much for hosting us. So my name is Howard Friedman. I have a background in statistics and engineering. I immediately began working in the corporate world, running data modeling teams at Capital One. These days, I'm quite busy doing a lot of consulting in private equity, healthcare, banking, all different industries, but also I teach part-time at Columbia. And of course, we're here to talk about a book that we just recently published.
Yes, exactly. And again, congratulations on that. I think before we get into the topic of winning with data science, I want to hear the book story. So Akshay, you're in California. Howard, you're in Manhattan, as I just discovered. You're at the opposite ends of the country. So how did you do this? How did the idea come about? Tell us the journey.
Well, I can jump in, give a little bit of a start, and Akshay could correct all my mistakes. How about that? Which is kind of how we wrote the book anyway. So basically, in terms of the book, I had written books before. I had met Akshay when he was an undergrad, and I was just blown away. I mean, just brilliant, insightful. But he goes well beyond the science. This man speaks so many languages fluently. He had a YouTube channel. So I was just really amazed by Akshay. And so when I started thinking about writing a book about how to be a good data science customer, I reached out to Akshay and asked him if he might be willing to co-author with me. So that's my version of the story.
Okay, Akshay, let's hear your story.
No, it was great to meet Howard. It's not very often that you meet people, colleagues, and then you end up working with them on sort of bigger projects. I think it's always very special when that happens and things come to fruition. Sort of the motivation for the idea behind the book, some shared insights that Howard and I both had from our experience working in data science, is that oftentimes the people who determine the success of a data science project are not actually the data scientists themselves, but rather it's the business people, it's the collaborators, it's the stakeholders who are responsible for scoping out the problem, refining the question, making sure that the data solution has an end user. Right? Without all those key pieces, you can waste a lot of time, effort, and resources. And so we realized there are a ton of resources out there for people who want to be data scientists and who want to learn the technical aspects. Very few resources for people who work with data science teams, talking about how can you be an effective collaborator, an effective data science customer. So that's where that was the gap that we wanted to fill with this book.
Absolutely. I love that. And do you think that the people you wrote this book for, the business leaders, right? Do you think this is something they've been searching for? Because I would assume so. They want good ROI from their data science projects. So I'm assuming they're grabbing this book left and right, trying to learn how to become better collaborators. But what have you seen?
Yeah, I think that's our hope. I mean, a lot of businesses want to use data and want to incorporate data, but they struggle to do so, right? Maybe they will embark on a data science project that goes nowhere or doesn't come to fruition. And so this book is, we talk about what are the reasons why businesses fail at integrating data within their, operations. There are, of course, technical reasons, right? Maybe you don't have the skills, et cetera, the data isn't there or whatever. But then there are also a ton of business reasons, right? And that's the focus of our book.
So, but on that point, originally we were focused on business leaders, the MBA type. But interestingly, we've seen two audiences. The one that we originally envisioned, and the other one are data scientists themselves who want to get a better perspective on how to support their customers. Because our book is focused on arming the customer with, for example, good questions. And we encourage them to challenge assumptions and giving a basic language. But if the data scientist, if she or he can understand what the customer is thinking and perhaps is going to ask, it empowers them as well. So really, we've seen two audiences, which is quite exciting. And I mean, you know this from your own writing. You plan a book, you write a book, you have an audience in mind, and it turns out there's a different audience who really gravitated to it as well.
Yes. It's always nice to hear that not just the data visualization experts are reading my ColorWise book. Folks in design have picked it up as well, and they're like, "Oh my God, I didn't expect them to read it," so I can absolutely relate. Now, there are some books that you read and you're like, "Wow, this was a difficult read," and then there are others that you feel like you can just breeze through them because of the writing style or because of just the way it's structured. Can you talk a bit about your writing style and how would a person feel after they've just read the book? Would they say this was a easy read, or would they say it was more like a textbook style?
So I think it looks nothing like a textbook, and I teach from textbooks. And the reason why I think it's nothing like it is it's told in narrative style. There's fictitious characters, one working in consumer finance, another one who's working in the health insurance industry. And there's dialogue and there's exchanges. We have a simulated coding contest. We have all those type of activities that you might experience in the real world, and they're learning as they go through that. So my own bias is I think it's very readable, but we end each chapter with key questions or structures that a customer could use to understand it better. But truly, nothing like a textbook. It's meant to be very flexible, very readable, and hopefully people really enjoy the characters who do grow throughout the story. They make some career decisions towards the end, but Akshay can tell you more about the decisions and how we came about that idea.
Yeah, I'd love to learn more.
Yeah. So as Howard said, we wrote it this way, not just to make it more enjoyable to read, right? Who really wants to be reading another dry textbook, but also to illustrate what do these real world conversations look like? What does an effective dialogue between a business stakeholder and a technical data person look like? The back and forth where they're, hashing out details about, okay, how do we define our outcome variable? What are the data sources we're going to use? How can the business person effectively inject their domain expertise? And how can, the technical teams effectively communicate complex concepts in language that everyone can understand? And so we wanted to give some more insight into what does effective dialogue and communication look like.
Yeah. And so like in a fiction book, we actually started by discussing their backstories. Who are these people? Where did they come from? How did they get to this point in their career? And where are they going? So really, as if you ever take these writing courses on writing fiction books, it's kind of that approach, is understand who they are and then build that in to the overall story.
Yeah, and it helps the reader, right? Because now we relate to them. We feel like we know them on a more personal level. So speaking of personal, my next question is, they're fictitious characters, but are they actually based on real people? Because you both have extensive experience and different backgrounds in data science careers. Are these kind of your colleagues and friends you're talking about there or no?
I think most fiction is a thinly veiled life, is a nice way to put it. Certainly, Steve, who works in a consumer finance company, sounds a lot like my own experiences because I worked in consumer finance for a number of years, doing different rotations in different departments. But also, I was working a lot in the healthcare space. So there's definitely a lot of reality going on there. But I think, as we dig more into the healthcare, and of course, Akshay's got all of his experience in Cerebral. Maybe you could comment, Akshay, on how much of your real life is in that book as well.
Yeah, well, first of all, one of the protagonists, Kamala, she's named after my grandmother, so there's that aspect. But then the dynamics of so Kamala has an MD MBA background, right? So she's a clinician, she's also a business person, and I've had the privilege of working with a number of really skilled data savvy clinicians during my time at Flatiron Health, at Cerebral as well, and during my time in academia. And so certainly drawing a lot of inspiration from the amazing product managers, clinicians, and data savvy business people who, in my mind, are the role models that all business stakeholders should aspire towards.
Yeah, I love that you used your grandma's name there. I'm sure that was special for your family as well, just to have that reference in there. So my next question is, we know that they're helping these fictitious characters, but can we share one or two examples of where data science has actually made a difference? And I'm sure my audience, most of them are data professionals, so they've seen these stories, they've heard these stories. But if, let's say, someone from the business side were to join this call or conversation that we're having right now, how would you describe to them sort of the benefit of a success story of using data science? We can go into finance or healthcare, either way.
Sure.
Why don't Akshay, do you want to start with a healthcare one, or I'll do finance?
Sounds good. So it all starts with a real world problem, right? So I'm going to talk about a problem that we faced at Cerebral. So Cerebral, as I mentioned, is a mental health provider platform, and every day we have thousands of messages from patients saying everything from, hey, I need help scheduling my appointment, to I didn't get my meds on time. But some patients can also message in and say, hey, I'm really not doing well today. I'm feeling like hurting myself or worse, right? And in those instances, we want to intervene and respond to them as fast as possible. And so the problem we were facing is that our response times, because our support team responding to these messages, it's all a manual team, right? Humans at the other end responding to patients, and our response times were just too long. And so we were thinking, is there a way we can use data science to decrease these response times, especially for the patients who are experiencing mental health crises? So this was an amazing collaboration between the data science team and our clinical teams, and a great example of how we started with the business problem and we designed the solution, collaborating very closely every step of the way with the end users. So the end users are the crisis specialists, the crisis response team. And to give you a little bit of context about what they do, they are mainly operating in Slack, which many of you might know is a instant messaging platform that a lot of businesses use. So this crisis team is using Slack to identify concerning messages, responding to, pulling in clinicians where necessary, and then using it as a platform to reach out to patients. And so we decided that the best way to do this would be to build a machine learning model that can identify these concerning messages from patients who are having a mental health crisis, route those messages into Slack, where the crisis team already is doing their day-to-day work, so that all they have to do, they just get an influx of messages whenever the model detects a concerning one. And from there, they can just reach out to the patient directly. And so we implemented this system, rolled it out at scale. It's been in production now for almost 2 years. Wow. It's helped. It scanned over 1 million messages and has helped identify over 5,000 patients with mental health crises. And the most impactful piece of this, brought down our response times to these patients from over 10 hours to under 10 minutes, right? And let me tell you, the key here is not in the model. It's not in the modeling. It's not in the technical stuff. It's the simplest model you could think of. The key to the success of this was in the collaboration with the stakeholder team, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talked with them. We learned, okay, what are your needs? What is the platform and the interface that you're comfortable with? And we designed a data solution that met them where they were, and that's how this model ended up getting deployed. Instead of just you write a paper about the results about the AUC, and then it sits in the literature, or it sits on some shelf and doesn't actually impact lives. So I think that's a great example of successful collaboration there.
Absolutely. Wow. That's mind blowing to go down from 10 hours to under 10 minutes in response times. That you're literally saving lives. And I think I love all, like, the healthcare stories always get me because you're actually making so much progress, and it doesn't even have to be that complicated, right? Like you just said, it's not the most complicated algorithm or anything like that. It's just making sure that two teams are actually talking to each other and fixing an actual need. So thank you so much for sharing that example. Howard, good luck beating that one with finance. I'm sorry. What did you do, Howard? Did you save some bank a lot of money, or?
Now I want to use a health example because that one sounded too
You can't
good.
go back. I'm sorry.
All right. Yeah, hold me to it. So I'll use one example from a private equity firm. So private equity firm owned a large restaurant chain. The restaurant chain had a loyalty program with 1 million customers, so very substantial. But they hadn't analyzed the data. They weren't really doing much with it. In fact, they were sending the same offer to every single customer. So first thing we wanted to do is understand, well, what is the business goal? What do they want to do? So it was a conversation with the business people as well as with the IT people, the finance, to understand what are the goals, what are the potential data sources, what could be addressed if we built a comprehensive loyalty database. And then we went about building that database, introducing the basics of customer clustering. And from that, we were able to identify, for example, that you could easily find who are the vegetarians. So don't send them a steak offer. They're not going to be happy. Who are the families with the children on board? Maybe a family special would be appropriate. Couples night out. It seems like people once a month are going out as a group of two. And all those occasions. So we targeted the communication. They saw the largest sales bump they had seen in over 2 years. Also, there was 50,000 lapsed accounts by the targeted communication. We were able to revive those accounts. More importantly, by taking the time to work with the business units, understand their problems, as well as train the internal teams, they came up with their own clusters later, more advanced, because again, we started with simple solutions. Often simple solutions can get you a lot of the value, but they created more advanced clusters and continue to own that process, as well as bringing in other external data sources to make it an even richer loyalty database that's being applied for many different purposes. So overall, definitely a business success story. I don't know if I saved that many lives on that example, but I think it really should. But it showed true business value. Literally, the moment they turned that loyalty database on and started implementing the targeted offers, they saw the explosion in sales.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's not saving lives, but you definitely have proven business value. So thank you for sharing that. I wanted to go back quickly to Akshay. You were saying that your model was simple. And I think back, I forget who I was talking to. It was a professor, actually. And we were talking about the fact that when people are in school, they're getting their master's, their PhD, you're usually rewarded for coming up with the most complex algorithm, the most complicated code. And then you get spit out to the business, you get a job, and then you're not rewarded for that any longer. Do you think, and Howard, your perspective here would matter a lot as well, because you're actually, you're a professor. So do you think there's a disconnect between what the business really needs, which is those simple solutions, the collaboration, the making sure you're actually working towards solving a real problem, versus what's taught in school? Or has that changed? Has the curriculum been updated to promote more of the sort of hands-on application, problem-solving type of skills?
Well, absolutely. My class is
Of
only
course,
focused on
Howard.
the important stuff. I'm glad you asked that. No, in all seriousness, Kate, what you described there is very important, which is start with the problem
Yeah.
and focus on implementable solutions. And that's really what we emphasize in the book as well. Don't start with a tool. So what I don't like is someone says, I need some good examples of how I'm going to use Gen AI. Because I say, well, you've already decided the tool and now you're looking for a problem. Start with the problem. What is the business issue? Something about increasing revenue or decreasing costs. And then let's figure out the solutions for that. And as we start talking about solutions, sometimes a simple solution will get you 80, 90% of the value. And I'm all for that. And then you can decide, do you want to work at the margins? Do you need something far more complicated? Because if so, those tools exist. The
Yeah.
incremental cost for the data can be incurred if it's potentially worth it. But it's nice to also look on the outside and understand what is the best in class. So when I'm doing like rent prediction models, we know what the MAPEs, the mean absolute percentage errors are for the best in class models. So we get to ask ourselves, how good are we versus that? Is it worth the time, the money to try and get better? And that's a question we can ask. But often, starting with the problem, clear analysis and basic models can get you most of the value in a lot faster time, usually than the most advanced models. But Akshay, you're living and breathing this in the healthcare world. What's your experience?
So in healthcare, we always say 99% of clinical prediction models that are built never get deployed and never actually touch patient lives.
Wow.
And you can see this. If you look in the literature, there are hundreds of papers predicting heart attack risk, predicting sepsis risk, predicting, name the outcome, there's a model for it, right? But these models are useless, right? Until they are deployed and until they're shaping clinical decision making. And so I think exactly as you said, Kate, in academia on the research side, you to be on the cutting edge, you're working on improving the latest and greatest technology, but oftentimes the business problems don't require that level of sophistication. A great example of this, my first project when I joined Cerebral, in healthcare has a long way to go when it comes to becoming data driven. And so, the state of things in healthcare is most clinicians do not track and don't have access to basic data on all of their patients. Like if you asked, how many patients are on your panel? Who is the highest acuity? Who are the ones that you haven't met with in the longest time that, could be at high risk, right? These are basic questions that folks can answer. And so the first thing we did at Cerebral when I joined was we designed very simple data reports for every clinician. So every clinician every month would get a report on, who are all my patients, whose symptoms are most severe, who hasn't shown up to their last few appointments, and nothing more than descriptive statistics, basic tables, not even any plots or anything, right? And you'd be surprised the amount of feedback we got from clinicians being, this is so helpful. This really helps me, understand who are my highest acuity clients. I'm going to schedule appointments with them right away now. And, what is the technology here? The technology is like means and, percentages and creating tables, but it adds so much value. And so, as Howard said, start with the problem, not with the tool, with the solution.
You're so right, Akshay. I remember one of my projects, I was at a consulting firm and I was getting into data visualization. This is about 10 years ago, wow, 10 or 11 years ago. And I remember I did something as simple as show them the potential revenue from two different systems. Take A from here, B from here, and add it together in Tableau and put a dashboard in front of them. I mean, obviously you could cut it by department and whatever. They were blown away. They're like, we didn't know we could do that.
But it's interesting because like I was working with a company recently, and this is a serious modeling company, very, very advanced prediction. It's actually in the healthcare space. They have had some deployments, but they have pushed themselves so far into the advanced modeling that they can't answer very basic questions. And so they stumbled on the very simple questions of, so what's in your data dictionary, for example? What are the fields that you have? How many distinct records do you have? That was stuff that they should have been able to answer But again, they're sitting there producing the most impressive machine learning models in the world. As a client, you want to know that they've got ground zero down well, because if not, I'm very concerned about what they're building all the way up in that tower. It might be quite unstable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we're getting close to time here, so I do have two final questions. So I'll start with this. We hear about generative AI quite a bit these days. I'm surprised your book is not called Winning with Gen AI, and I'm actually glad it's not because we need people to grasp data science. Do you think that Gen AI is sort of distracting people at this point, or do you think it's helping folks maybe focus a bit more on data science? I want to hear your thoughts. And does your book cover Gen AI at all?
So first of all, I like that title. For when we go into our reprint, we can definitely talk about changing it to that, Winning with Gen AI. We do talk a little bit about Gen AI in the book. The challenge with books is that by the moment they finally published, they start looking a little dated. That's just the reality of a book. But we do talk a little bit about Gen AI. My own perspective is that it is opening up incredible opportunities and a tremendous amount of interest. There is a bit of, for many companies, a misallocation of interest. And so there's pressure to do something with Gen AI, starting with the tool, not the problem. But also I'm working with groups that are using it very effectively, are getting value, are seeing savings, cost savings, reduced operations costs, and basically replacing a lot of entities that either they would have hand programmed and taken a long time to do, but now they're able to do it very, very quickly using sentiment analysis in Gen AI, or using it as a feature in their own predictive model. So I'm seeing some great applications of it, but I'm also seeing a lot of potential misallocation of resources.
Right. And Akshay, do you think that this is something that needs prioritization? Where do you think the prioritization should be more on, like Gen AI or data science for the average organization?
I think that's probably not the right question to ask, right? The right question to ask is, what are the biggest areas of priority in the business right now? And then given those areas, what are the right tools to solve those? And, it all comes back to basically, like Howard said, start with the problem, not with the tools. Figure out how you're going to measure success. Measuring success actually has shown to be more challenging with generative AI. For example, if you roll out a solution to, use Gen AI to respond to patient messages, for example, in the healthcare setting, and you're doing that because presumably you think it'll save you time, right? Maybe you'll be able to respond to more messages. But we haven't seen that proved out. Actually, we've seen that a lot of times when Gen AI is used to draft responses to messages, especially in the healthcare setting, it actually takes more time for people to go in and edit those responses because, healthcare, you got to get it right. And so, for humans to actually go in and review the entire thing and edit it, the gains are not as clear as we might have hoped. And so you got to come back to the basics, define your success metrics well, do the evaluations. Don't just treat Gen AI as a panacea for all your problems.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So we are officially at time, but before we wrap, I want to ask you both to let my audience know first of all, where do they get the book? And two, where can they go to continue the conversation? Are you on LinkedIn? Are you on Twitter? What's your preference? So Akshay, let's start with you.
So to learn more about the book, to get the book, go to winningwithdatascience.com. And I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, and we can continue the conversation there.
Great. And Howard?
So in addition to that website, which by the way, Akshay built personally, it's a very nice website. You can also find it on Amazon.com and all major online booksellers. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm very actively engaged there. And so feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'd love to continue the conversation.
Perfect. And by the way, congrats on the book plus the domain, man. That's a great domain name to acquire. I didn't think that was going to be available. I expected .io or .co or something, but you ended that with a .com. I love that. And then for anyone who already has the book or is going to get the book and has read the book, this is a public disclaimer. Make sure you go on Amazon and leave a 6.5-star review. Howard's going to personally come and thank you for it. If you don't know how to do it, he will share his screen and show you how to add that 6 star. On that note, I want to thank you, Akshay and Howard, so much for being on the DATAcated Show, and we'll see everybody online. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. A lot of fun.
Bye.